Cambridge is famous for its university and its river punting, but it's now got a place in the history books for recording the highest ever temperature in the UK, 38.7 degrees in July last year. We've all felt the summers getting warmer, the winters wetter and so on, but these new statistics are further evidence that our country, and in turn our planet, is experiencing more extreme weather. 2000 to 2009 was the warmest and wettest decade of the past century. But between 2010 to 2019, which was the second warmest and wettest decade, weather records were also set in traditional winter and spring months of January, February and April. The last decade had just one low temperature record in March 2018.
Certainly in a warming climate, we do expect to see certain types of extremes become more frequent. So these high temperature records, for example, and that's being borne out by the data that we're seeing here in the UK. And that's a trend that we will expect to continue through the 21st century.
The so-called beast from the east barrelled through Britain as the coldest March day ever recorded. But similar weather systems will become more common. Climate change is the long-term shift in average weather patterns. The release of carbon dioxide and other greenhouse gases cause temperatures to rise. But it's not just the UK which has been experiencing more extreme weather. Globally, 2019 is expected to be the second or third hottest year since 1850. Lisa Holland, Sky News.
Let's get some expert opinion now, why don't we? Liz Bentley, the Chief Executive of the Royal Meteorological Society, joins me now in the studio. It's good to have you on the programme this hour. And anecdotally, we've been saying for a long time, well, it's hotter this summer, isn't it? And the winters aren't as terrible as before. So now you've got evidence, first-hand evidence, that the UK, at least, if not the planet, is getting warmer.
Yeah, so the data that's come from the Met Office has clarified what we already knew. We've had these record-breaking temperatures, not just in 2019, but also over the last decade. And we've seen 8 high temperature records being broken and only 1 low temperature record. So that was linked with the beast from the east back in March of 2018.
So how does that compare to other decades to have 8?
So we're seeing more and more of these high temperature records being broken, a greater frequency of those, and we're seeing less and less of the low temperature records being broken. So we've seen that shift. And as I say, we would expect that as we're seeing a warming generally in our climate. So we've had about a 1 degree Celsius warming in the UK since about the 1850s. Very similar to the global average temperature increase that we've seen as well. And here in the UK, and the figures that we've seen from the Met Office focus on the UK, you can see that with that extra warming, that 1 degree warming, when we get heat wave events like we had in July and the extreme temperatures that we saw, that extra heat is put on. So in heatwave events, we see even more extreme temperatures and the records being broken that we saw last year.
In the first week of January, it's always quite nice, isn't it, to look at someone eating an ice cream
as they do. To keep cool.
And of course, you know, for a few days, it's nice at least, but it is serious, isn't it? Especially when you have the big metropolitan areas and it's incredibly hard to do work and live in that environment, isn't it? Apart from the fact it's also bad for the environment. It has real consequences, doesn't it?
Yeah, and 1 degree warming doesn't sound very much, but the impacts that has can be quite extreme.
What impact are you looking at?
Well, again, if you look back to the heat wave that we had over the summer, the impact it had on infrastructure, if you remember, there was melting of rail tracks and the electric cable. So, you know, our infrastructure isn't really geared up for those high temperatures. The impact it has on humans and ecosystems, so mortality rates tend to rise during that extreme heat. So it has a real negative impact on us, not just, you know, taking the enjoyment with a bit of warm sunshine and extra ice creams that we can have. It's the impact that it has, the negative impact.
Of course, the flooding is just terrible, isn't it, for anyone who's lost their home because of flooding. It's not all kind of I know it is getting warmer as a trend, but we had the beast from the east, didn't we, 2 or more years ago, and that was a bitingly cold winter for a long time. What happened then? Yeah,
so unusually cold spell for us in the UK. It came at the very end of winter and into the early spring as well. So again, you know, springtime you would expect it to start warming up, and it certainly... And that was when we had our lowest temperature record in this last decade. So that happened on the 1st of March in 2018 during that beast from the east. What I would say is if it wasn't for
There
that...
you go. That's a reminder if you needed one, Liz.
Yeah, the other extreme, the other end, I guess, of the extremes. But if we hadn't have had that 1 degree warming that we've seen across the UK over this last 150 years or so, that could have actually been a much colder event than we actually experienced.
Wow, and that had huge ramifications, didn't it, for the country? We talked about infrastructure not coping with the heat. Certainly nothing coped with snow across the country. So what is your call to arms then? What is your call to action for the next decade as we head into the 2020s?
Yeah, so I think data like this that's come from the Met Office is evidence of what's actually happened. If we look back over the last year or the last decade, we need now to think about what's likely to happen in the future and what we can do about that. And 2020, I think, is a really key year for us in the UK. We've got COP26 that will take place at the end of the year in Glasgow, a real focus on climate change in the UK, a real call both for individuals, businesses, but especially governments to look at how we, not only in the UK, but globally, can focus on mitigating against climate change, so reducing the effect, the warming effect that we're likely to get because of climate change, but also adapting to climate change. We're seeing it happening. We've seen it over the last year, over the last decade, and we'll see more of that, and we need to adapt to that.
And is the political will there? Is momentum there to make proper changes? What do you think?
Well, it's mixed. There's certainly, if you look globally, there are some countries that are trying to push forward, setting, strong targets and trying to meet them. But I think we're way behind the curve. There's a lot of action to be taken. And COP26, as I say, at the end of the year, I think can be another refocus, not just for us in the UK, but globally as well.
OK, we'll leave it there. Liz, thank you so much. Liz Bentley, the Chief Executive of the Royal Meteorological Society. Thanks for your time.